Awesome. So, hey guys, if you don't know me already, my name is Michelle Vinicurve. My main job, I work as a paraprofessional, but there's so many things I do on my side. Like, I'm a blogger of my own blog series, The World of Autism, and I provide a lot of different perspectives with autism, not just my perspectives, but the community as well. And my guest on here is Ron Kerns. How you doing, Ron?
Okay, how are you? And
Good. What were you gonna
no, nothing. Just saying hi to
say?
everybody.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. So let's start it off here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Jeez, one of our one of our hated questions is that so open-ended, but I'll try to be brief.
Yeah, just
Okay.
a little, a little.
Okay. I am autistic. I am I'm a professional graphic designer. Um, Originally from the Detroit, Michigan area. We lived and worked in Dallas for 20 years, and now I live in rural and remote northern Arkansas. Um, got 3 kids, all college age. I was diagnosed in 2014 at age 46. So that was a huge eye-opener in many different ways. It was a big life changer more than anything, because it just gave the answers to why life was so challenging for so long. And so that's basically it, I guess. Unless you've got anything you're just dying to know.
It's great. It's great. What I also learned about you, like a little from your LinkedIn and stuff, that you're kind of also like a diversity slash inclusion advocate, right? Is that correct? Can you tell
Yeah,
me more about
I
that?
oh sure, I got into that not long after I was diagnosed, and I
Mm-hmm.
sought assistance. So yeah, I love let's see, then the rabbits just kind of go all over the place.
I
Um,
had that happen. It's not a problem. Take your time. It's all good.
the when I was my okay, I think I'll help to quickly tell my diagnosis story on
That's
how
fine. No problem.
I all of a sudden got diagnosed. It was about in 2011 is when it started. I was watching the first season or 2 of the TV show Parenthood when it was first airing. And as I was watching the first several episodes, I was watching the little kid Max, and just more and more was going, that kid just seems so much like me from when I was a kid, and all of that. And so one day when I was watching the show, I just pulled out my laptop and just started Googling, undiagnosed autism in adults or whatever like that. And that's just when the light bulb started coming on. The Google search was just like, boom, it just hit me. And then and what really did it was I came across the name of a book, Leanne Holiday Willie's Pretending to Be Normal. I just saw the name of the book, and it's her memoirs about growing up undiagnosed. She was diagnosed like when she was in her late 30s or something like that, and it was her memoirs of growing up undiagnosed and then finally getting diagnosed as a later in life. And anyway, so I just saw the name of the book, Pretending to Be Normal, and I went, that's me. And because I never really felt like I was doing anything. I always just felt like I was just pretending to be there at work or wherever. And so anyway, so that was in 2011, 12. And then in 2014, I was having extreme difficulties with job search. I've always had difficulty with job search, career, like so many of us do. And I sought help through a nonprofit that I had learned about called Launchability. And they help people with disabilities, particularly, intellectual and autism and that sort of thing, find appropriate work and retaining jobs and all that kind of stuff. But I needed a diagnosis. So that's what spurred me to get the diagnosis. And I forget what the question was. There was becoming an advocate.
Yes. Yeah.
So I get the diagnosis and I start getting assistance through Launchability. And Launchability really liked the idea that I was in a career that was not stereotypical of autistic people. You don't hear too many graphic designers out there, where you all usually get stereotyped in all these high-tech computer kind of things, And
yeah, I hear that a lot. I do hear that.
and so they started having me they had me tell my story to their board of directors. I went on a TV interview with the CEO one day, and that just kind of got the ball rolling about telling my story to people who would find it helpful or interesting or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I've been interviewed by New York Magazine and a couple of other nonprofits. I hear in our small town, I have been asked to present there, but that got all canceled because of COVID, but they're waiting to be able to do that sometime soon. And I do other small events here and there, and just to, like I said, just tell my story and make people aware of particularly the job aspect, because the job aspect for me was just huge as far as inability to land a job, and then once I got a job, keeping it and all that sort of stuff. Because here's a guy, me, 40-ish years old, unable to hold a job. I got 3 kids and all of that, and then just piled stress on top of stress on top of stress. Mm-hmm. So that's how all that came about.
Wow, that's interesting, because there are a lot of things that you mentioned that, and employment's one of the big ones. Like, even personally myself, like, even though like I'm in my 20s, I'm 22, and I'm just like starting out and everything in adulthood. So like with employment, it's not easy. Like, even as a paraprofessional, like things get thrown at you, changes like of my position and stuff. So it's not easy to be able to like, and I'm just starting out. Like I'm literally just starting out, and so.
But you've got a huge advantage. You're starting out knowing you're autistic.
Yeah.
Not knowing was even a bigger hurdle, because it's assumed you're just like everybody else because you have no reason to believe otherwise. And then when you do have those difficulties, there's nothing to attribute it to. I had the difficulties with fitting in, or not communicating well with others, or comprehending whatever was given to me, especially verbally, and all that kind of stuff. And yet I had no idea why that was. So the assumption was I was lazy, I was incompetent, and all that other stuff. And yeah, knowing, just the knowing of it made it all that getting a diagnosis worth it. Because then it gave me the knowledge to say, okay, now I know why. Now I can go further because I know this.
Right. It definitely makes a huge difference. I know there's been I hear a lot of debate about that. Like, is it better to know your diagnosis early on or even just like knowing about it in general? Like, there's like so many different perspectives about that. I met people who, they're glad that they found out as an adult than as a child, or like even just like knowing that, like, you know what I'm saying? There's like so much,
Yeah.
yeah.
I always tell people that if I were a kid today and not in the 70s,
Mhm.
I would have been I mean, I can, now that I know the traits and the behaviors and all that kind of stuff, I can think back to all sorts of different events and situations that happened when I was in school or whatever, that the red flags were just flying all over the place,
Mhm.
but just nobody knew. So having basically, a significant disability, but being totally undiagnosed and unsupported, I just kind of just muddled through it all.
Right. Like, I know I'm going to tell you a little bit from my perspective a bit, because I recently was in a published book by Miss Jessica Letchwitz. I'm in a webinar series called Asking Autistic. I'm one of the panelists for it. And there was a book that recently came out that I'm in the book for. And for me, my parents found out like more about with me comparing to my older sister, because my older sister is neurotypical, and to a family friend who was showing the same stuff, but they didn't know what autism is. Back then, there wasn't that much knowledge about it as today. You know, it's very different today than it was back then. It really is.
Yeah, so that just made the whole thing that much more difficult, to having all the challenges and difficulties, but never knowing why.
Hmm. Yeah, and this is why it's so important today that, like, for everybody to, this is where the importance of educating about with autism needs to still continue.
So that brings to mind what happened when I got my diagnosis. I ended up going through 2 full days of assessments and evaluations to
Mhm.
get the diagnosis. And so the psychologist brought me back a couple weeks later, and sat me down and went through piece by piece what all of these tests meant and my results and all of that. When she got about halfway through, then she just stopped and just gave me the strangest look on her face and just said, "How in the world did you make it so far and for so long?" And I was like, "I don't know." Um, but it was right there. It was like, because I even went in to on day one of the evaluation, um, like, am I really going to get diagnosed? Are they just going to like, oh, you're not autistic? After all of that, I had no idea what to expect. And so when she said that, I was like, whew, it wasn't just in my head.
Right, right. I feel like a lot of people have gone through that, including myself, where I've had people saying that, like, in my years, like early years, was like, no, you don't have, you're not autistic. Like, there's no way and stuff. Like, it took me a bunch of times before getting diagnosed I was diagnosed in New York, because I'm originally was born in New York and stuff. So, I got diagnosed by it was my neurologist I still go to today. It was his medical student that was in New York, and there was that whole connection. So yeah, anyway, it just took a bunch of people that they're like, no, you're perfectly healthy. I'm like, my parents were like, yeah. So that's yeah. It just even from like medical professionals, like there's gonna be some that see it like that are gonna have that belief, which I don't. I still don't get why today like that, and then like you were saying, eventually you had that one person that's like that, like yes, like this is what you have and stuff. And when I learned eventually about it myself, I actually learned about my diagnosis when I was in middle school because I kind of was like more aware by then. So when I learned and stuff, and it was through with my family and stuff, and we were watching a documentary about, I don't know if you know Dr. Temple Grandin.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. So through her documentary and stuff, we were like watching it one day, and my parents were like explaining to me there are a lot of similarities about yourself.
Was that a documentary or was that the movie about her?
That was the movie about her, but
The uh, the
yeah,
the Thinking in Pictures.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, it was not long after I was diagnosed and I learned about the movie. And so sometime along the way I thought, well, that'd be interesting to watch a movie about this.
Mhm.
And that's when it struck me that that's exactly what I do. I think in pictures, which kind of makes sense considering what I do. I'm a graphic designer. But I had never thought of it that way until I saw the movie and saw you know, how they put the graphics up there, the thinking processes and all of that. I was like, I do that.
That's really cool. And actually, speaking about with being a graphic designer, is that like your like what you created yourself? Like, are you running your own like graphic design like company in a way? Like, that's why I was trying to understand based on your website because I did look
Um,
at your website.
I do run my own creative consultancy, mainly out of necessity because um,
Mhm.
I had one really good job that last the job. Okay, so I've been out of college and in my profession for it'll be 30 years next year, and 5 years is the longest I've ever lasted any one place. And so there was one place I worked at from 2004 to 2009, 5 years. And after I lost that job, um, we had gotten a kind of a 6 weeks advance notice that, hey, your job is going to be going away. And that's just what's going to happen. And so right then and there, I went into freelance mode. I, contacted all the printing companies I worked with, had been working with, and everybody else I had gotten to know, who were outside of the company, that worked in my general area of business, and said, hey, just found out my job's leaving. I'll be available for freelance and all that. And so then that's what really kind of got the ball rolling, because when I lost that job, it was about 2.5 years before I got another one.
Mm-hmm.
And then even that one didn't go very well and only lasted a year and a half. And then I was without a job for 5 years before I landed the job I have now. I work for a small campus of Missouri State University, located in a small town about 2 hours away from the main campus. And so I am the sole designer for the campus. I do everything from the admissions guides to everything for the 2 athletic teams that they have. The annual report is just a constant, so much that needs to be done. Campus events and you name it. And so it keeps me busy. It's a nice wide variety of different kinds of projects I get to work on every day. past few months, I've been working on a lot of COVID-related things. I designed these round floor decals that went up all over, that when actually should say down, went down on the floors all over campus, reminding students to social distance. And posters and signage that reminding people to social distance. And so yeah, there's just a vast array of work that I do. And when I had, like I said, had been unemployed for about 5 years at the time. During much of that time I was unemployed, I was living in Dallas. I was getting pretty fed up with the whole job search. Had a few interviews that like should have been so easy. It's like slam dunks. Like, wow, why? How could I have not gotten that job? And then one day, I just called it quits. I said, "That's it." My wife, in the meantime, had been kind of nudging me that her dad was living up here in this area, but he was living all alone. His wife had passed away a few years earlier, and so he was up here all by himself, and she was kind of getting concerned about him, and had been kind of dropping hints that, oh, wouldn't it be nice to live up here? But living up here in such a rural area, there really aren't any jobs, many. So after that string of jobs that I didn't get, I said, fine, let's just go. I had plenty of freelance work I could do for a good while. And I knew we were already pretty familiar with the area. So I knew that there was a handful of places that did hire a designer. So I knew it was only a matter of time that somebody would, have the help wanted sign out or whatever. And then I came to the conclusion that way out here in the middle of nowhere, how many other designers could there possibly be that have the experience and background that I've got? So it was just a waiting game. So we were here for 2 years when I then saw a post on Indeed at this small campus of Missouri State, just up the road. We live in Arkansas, but I go to work in Missouri every day. And the small campus of West Plains needed a graphic designer, so I applied. And one other really cool thing about that was, with them being a major public university, I was pretty darn sure that diversity and inclusion was a big priority for them. And they even read their diversity and inclusion statement to me there in the interview, to give me a opportunity to comment on it. What's your feelings about this? That kind of thing. And so I said, well, I'm autistic, so that's great. So that was one of the few times that I even, disclosed that I was autistic in an interview, because by that time, they had just been raving about the work I had shown them in my portfolio and such. And it really seemed like everybody was going to be understanding and even kind of appreciate the fact that I was autistic and still did this. And so that's how that happened.
That is really cool. Like, it just even for the college, just to say in the interview about with inclusion and diversity, you don't hear that much about that in other places.
Well, like I said, I mean, being a major public university, and I'm essentially an employee of the state of Missouri, government and whatever. That's something of a requirement in a way, but they, yes, it is a requirement, but they definitely, my boss is so very understanding, patient. Whenever one of the things, being a sole designer, my to-do list can get kind of long.
Mm.
and sorting through priorities. Well, what next group of projects should I be working on, and that sort of thing, can sometimes get kind of confusing. And so anyway, she's always, never had a problem with, hey, could you help me out with this for a moment? And, always glad to help and whatever. Or since I do live about 45 minutes away, I get up fairly early, and it's been like twice I've had a meltdown in the morning getting ready for work. One thing after another happens, and then
Right.
you lose it. And so my wife can text my manager and just say, hey, Ron had a meltdown. And my way of recovering from my meltdown is just laying down on the couch and just basically taking a nap for an hour or two. That kind of helps me kind of reset.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife can text my manager and say, hey, you know what, my Ron had a meltdown this morning. He's kind of resting, and he'll be in, but it'll be later on this morning or whatever. And her response has always been, thanks for letting me know. Tell Ron to take his time, and we'll just see him when he gets here.
Wow, that's wonderful to have like such a good relationship like with your boss and just with whatever it is your the college and stuff, and just that's important for any workplace, and that's what needs to be addressed more is like just having that good relationship and stuff, and just for like just having a boss that's like that knows you, like that's gonna talk to you and like wants to know you more as a person. They'll work with you on things that needs to be worked on and stuff. That's very nice of your wife that she did that and stuff too.
Yeah, she's I was just mentioning, in fact, I think I just mentioned to somebody yesterday about a lot of autistic people have a problem with going about difficulties with self-advocacy, or avoiding going out of the way to avoid conflict because that just causes problems. And thankfully my wife is one of those people who, she's totally not autistic. She's in neurotypical. Neurotypical. And
Wow.
so she kind of helps pick up those things that is like, gee, no, I'm not going to do that. Here, you can, whether like calling somebody to complain about something, she's more than glad to do it. It's like, oh, thank goodness. What was I going to say? So when I got the job, the first thing I did was call my caseworker with the nonprofit back in Dallas to let her know, so we could have that discussion about, okay, the discussion we never had, okay, now I've got the job, now what? And, and one thing that she emphasized, which was true, was you're going in on the right foot. They know you're autistic, and you know you're autistic now. And so from day one, that's the way it was. And so that helped out a lot.
I could see that just from that point on, it really helped guide you in the direction of now you know what you want to do, like what to accomplish next and stuff. So that's incredible. That is really incredible, Ron. So the last thing, just to wrap this up, is that do you have any advice for those that are living with autism that like I know you've been saying about your struggles with like employment and stuff. Is there any advice you want to give to them and to like to families and
Oh, geez. Here's one thing. There, and this is going to probably get kind of long, but I gotta. So when I was as I mentioned before, I had huge difficulties when I was a kid. I was brutally bullied constantly from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, and even in college a bit. It changed, but it was still that. And and so all through school, when I was in school, I never really got to know anybody. I just knew of people because you never really became friends with anybody. You just kind of knew who people were, you know. Fast forward to when I got the diagnosis. By then, I was on Facebook a bit, and I got friended by a fair number of people who I had known from way back when I was in school, even the earliest days of kindergarten, for instance. You know, that sort of thing. And so I even went through my list and private messaged a group of them who had known me from the very, very, very beginning, and said, "Hey, I've got an autism diagnosis," and that sort of thing. And there was a fair number of them was like, "Well, that makes so much sense." Putting that all together, as far as, because they all knew the huge difficulties I had in school and this and that. And so as a result, there's two people in particular who had, like I say, I really didn't know them very well when I was in school, who started asking me about being autistic because their kids are autistic. One is a daughter and the other one's a son. And so they would ask me stuff about being autistic and, oh, what do you know? What's your thought about this or that? And so anyway, so now we become really, really good friends because of that. And so one thing that always comes up was, especially when it comes with college, is the reluctancy to take advantage of support and services. And I say, and so my thought on this is, being somebody who went through college with not knowing, no support, no services, no nothing, and just barely getting by the skin of my teeth, is, you know, take advantage of anything you can get when it comes to support and services. I mean, if you're eligible for it, get it. Even and then even with, you know, job and career, you know, I sought out places that, you know, would help people with disabilities or who are autistic with the whole job search thing. They're hard to, sometimes they can be hard to find because they just don't have the budgets to kind of publicize themselves. So you really got to dig. But it's, you know, well worth it when you do find a good place to get those support and services, because they help.
You're absolutely right. Like nowadays there are more resources out there that anybody can go to and stuff and find out more, just to like support in all areas, from like learning about the diagnosis to employment to like in the schools and stuff. There's so much out there, like even like understanding like individualized like education plans, because I've been hearing a lot with that lately, with that process and stuff. So it just, there are so many resources out there. Keep reaching out. And that was great advice, Ron. That was excellent. Thank you for sharing that, and for coming on to share your story as a guest. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, sure. Always glad to tell my story.
Awesome. It was great having you on here.